And then I'm going to share my screen. By the way, I do sing when things happen as I get stuff ready. So lucky you. And then I just need to play this slideshow. And we're going to admit Lisa. We have one more person joining us right now. Lisa, welcome.
Hi there. Just
Thank
getting
you. That's all we can ever do is just get organized, right? Perfect. All righty. So let's jive, but also let's dive on in. So first off, thank you all so much for coming to the Let's Talk Hope Canada conference. This is truly an amazing conference. The speakers that we had this morning, I mean, I was laughing. I definitely teared up a lot. My heart grew. The incubators that we were in, I mean, I don't know about you. I know Heidi, but our group was just so honest and so powerful, and the connection that was there was so wonderful. And now we're here to learn all about veracious values, using your voice to take action that matters. Before I jump on into the presentation, I had my sister point out to me, she's like, Lindsay, I think you spelled veracious wrong. I did not. So veracious means truthful. These are our truthful, our fulfilling values versus voracious, which is really hungry. Now, it would work either way. If we have really hungry values, that's fine. These are our truthful values. And why is it important? Well, that's what we're going to be learning today. So, Lindsay's learning technology. This will be fun for everybody. So a little bit about me though, before I dive on in to just hopefully build a wee bit of trust between you is who the heck am I? Well, I am someone, just like all of you, but I am someone who has lived experience. I myself live with two different brain roommates. One of them is depression, one of them is anxiety. And not only that, but previously, and I apologize if this is a trigger, but I myself am I was a purger for a decade, and that's an eating disorder where I would just throw up everything I would eat. So I would look at an apple, I'd purge it out. That was a decade of my life, and I am so proud to say that this year is actually my decade anniversary of no more purging, because I decided at that last moment of, I do not need to do this anymore. Now, why did I do that is that I was simply trying to hide in the bathroom stalls when I was at employers, and I was just trying to keep my quirk in check. However, it wasn't that easy. And it was really when I started to sit down with my own gosh darn values that I found that life started to flow a little bit better, that, you know, it was quote unquote a smidge easier. And the only thing that actually changed was that I started to act and I made decisions and I set goals that were way more aligned with my true core values. And this meant that when I leaned into my quirk, when I tapped into my core self, it just became easier. And while I still live with depression and anxiety, and I do go through bouts, you know, it no longer controls me. It no longer stops me in fear. And I've learned how to talk about it and communicate it with clients, with colleagues, with friends, so that I can have, you know, a life. Because at the end of the day, our mental health does not define us, it guides us. And for what I hope for you today is that you and your values are really just perfect the way that they are. So I want you to be able to use your values. Now, and what can you, and at the end of the day, you can accomplish a lot when you're living true to yourself. I have been running a brand and content business for the past 10 years. I've written a book called Depression Constipation, How Pooping Saved My Sanity and Other Stories. And I have also started a podcast called Businesses Are People Too, a podcast. And these are things that I am so gosh darn proud of, that I never would have thought that I would have been able to do until I leaned into my values. So that's a wee bit about me. Oh golly, Lindsay Marie. My middle name's Marie. And so today's awesome combo is about you. And what we're going to be learning today is, number one, what the heck values are, because at the end of the day, they are not fluffy words and sound bites. They're actually actions in our life. How to determine what your actual values are and what your actual values in action are. How then can you use your values in your life with this action? And then fourth, what your values can do for your mind, your connections, and your overall inner peace. But first, I do want to give a wee warning about our values and their influence, because our emotional reactions, our goals, and our boundaries all stem from our values. Now, why is this? Because our values, our personal core values, are our underlying beliefs upon which we take action. So often, when an emotion is triggered, it's often because a value of ours is not being met. A boundary of ours has been crossed, and we just don't know how to move forward. Now, if I am going too fast, because I forget to breathe a lot of the time, please feel free to raise your hand and say, Lindsay, could you breathe? It might help. So just let me know. Now, what do values do? They inform our personal sense of morals and ethics. I just have a dog deciding to let me know that he's here. Please stop it, Chase. They guide our decision-making. And this is key for those moments of overwhelm and when we're stressed beyond stressed. It often means that we are not looking at our values and understanding what is important to us for the action that we need to move. And we're considering everyone else's values, but our own. Our values support our sense of self and our identity, which is a big thing, as a lot of the time, and this comes from my husband's own experience of when his values weren't aligned, when a huge personal injury took his full sense of identity away from him, he lost his complete sense of self because he just tied his whole value to his body. And then more, our values actually connect us with community on a deeper level. Of course, why do they matter? Well, they actually have the power to harm us and others if we are not living with our values. So, first and foremost, why can they harm? Well, a lot of us tend to think of values from a more external way. So these are called junk values, and these tend to be more along the lines of status, power, materialism, money, and they typically rely on external validation. Now, this specific junk values term, I should have had my book ready before that, I apologize, comes from Tim Kazzer. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but I'm going to believe that I am. And I came across it in this book called Lost Connections by Johann Hari. It is one of the most profound books I've come across when it comes to understanding mental health, when it comes to understanding depression and anxiety, and how we can actually really tap into our values to move forward and be more connected. Now, what happens though, when we have junk values guiding our decisions, guiding our lives, is that we end up setting wrong goals. Now, goals themselves are these specific desired future states. They often have a timeline, they're often clear steps to achieve, and more importantly, they are very personal. So if we are setting goals that are with other people's values, we'll actually feel quite unfulfilled if we even achieve the goal at all. Or worse, if we don't even start trying to get that goal, we can feel like a loser or unaccomplished or just not able to do anything, and therefore we suck. But that's not true, because it's not your goal because it's not your value. And one other way is that if we are operating with junk values, if we are setting the wrong goals, we then have poor boundaries. And the boundaries in our lives are those barriers that we actually put in place to support us in reaching a goal. Our boundaries are what protect us. They protect us from harm, I guess. Let's just go there. They protect us and they take care of us and they help us to achieve our life. Now, these types of things can be like setting up specific physical spaces, limiting time with certain people who may take from your energy. But at the end of the day, that if you don't know your real values, if you're not able to set the goals that align with your values, then your boundaries can be way more easily crossed. And that then creates a lot of overwhelm, stress, shame, guilt, all those things that we do need to feel, but at the same time, we really don't. So at the end of the day, values protect us from social contagion. And goodness me, this is one of my favorite quotes. And I came across it this year from the brilliant emotional researcher, Dr. Susan David. This here's her book called Emotional Agility. And it's really big because when we are protected with our values, when we're able to make decisions from our values, we are less likely to be swayed by outside forces that leave us with this doubt, that leave us with guilt, and that leave us with a sense of disconnection. Not even just disconnection from others, but a huge sense of disconnection from ourselves. And that's a sad thing. Because at the end of the day, we're all pretty gosh darn awesome, aren't we? Apologies, I have a question. Chat. How do you figure out your values? And oh, my dear James, you're awake. You're ahead of us. We're going to get there. That's what this whole thing is about. Oh, I love it. You are like reading my mind. So I need to go back to this screen. There we go. So how do you identify your values? Well, my dears, it comes down to knowing what is important to you, when you yourself feel most connected, aligned, and in flow, and then also identifying what actions you do that demonstrate your values. And this is what we're going to be doing. So Veracious values, other than being a brilliant thing to swirl around in your mouth, is defining the values to use your voice with confidence and clarity. Now, what we're going to be doing, I'll go through this slide a little bit, and then we're going to be doing a little exercise. Written exercise, not physical exercise, although that is super fun at times. So we need to narrow down your top core 5 values. You need to identify the actions that you do that demonstrate these values. From there, we then create a definition of what that value is for you in your life. And this is key because not everyone has the same definition of a value. So for instance, I have humor as one of my core values. My definition is not going to be the same as what somebody else's is. So for me, my definition is to bring to bring the light into the dark without making light of the dark. And I have had to do that very intentionally, whereas some other people use humor as just making life laugh. That is very different values. I also have another one of significance. And for me, that's a very other person motivated one, because it's important to me that I have people that I engage in behaviors to make other people feel seen, to make other people feel loved, and to do it with no judgment. Other people have the definition of significance as to be important in life, to show up in their life, to have impact. Not one definition is wrong. but it is important to understand what your personal definition is. And you also, what we'll learn later is that you really only have one core value. And I'll talk about how we can identify that one core value. And with this one core value, when you take it away, your other core values fall away. So now we're going to exercise. It's super fun. Exercise time, my dears. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be not having to choose all 5 because it is not a short hour-long exercise. It takes time to really sit down and really write out what the different actions are. So what we're going to do today is choose one core value of yours. Please know, this is not a complete list of values out there. So if you are like, but Lindsay, I have a value and it's not even on this list, write it down. That's okay. At the end of this, what are we doing here? A workshop? At the end of this workshop, there is going to be a link and you with a download so that you can download this page along with the other examples and items that we're going to be talking to, so that post workshop, you can do this work yourself in a much calmer fashion. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be identifying one core value. From there, we're going to be writing out the action that is demonstrated in that value. And from there, we're then going to be creating your own personal definition. Now, so this is what we're doing. My core value is X. Action. This value is shown in my action by bloop. And definition. My definition of X value is bloop. Now, here's a little example. So again, as I said, humor is a big core value of mine. It is actually what started to pull me out of depression and start me moving forward in my life back in 2011. Because when I was sitting and talking with my therapist, she said to me, Lindsay, you have this really unique way of looking at life. You use humor even in these dark, dark moments. What would happen if you started to write? Because I was also a writer at the time, still am. And so from that, I started to purposely look for the humor in all my interactions and all the stories that were going on in my life. And I was then able to write stories about humorous things that happened in my day-to-day business living. So for me, the actions that humor is that I purposely look for the humor in every day, even on the really poopy days. I also send funny and uplifting texts to friends. I purposely look for puns. And so again, Rosie, thank you for your wonderful bad joke at the beginning. That is like, you literally just helped me with my value and I really appreciate that. I also watch comedies to make me laugh when I'm down, and I play with my dogs because there's nothing funnier than a dog chasing its tail. And when I sat down and started to identify all these different actions, I was like, what then is my definition? Well, again, so my definition of what humor in my life is I look to bring light to the dark. But more importantly, I look to bring light to the dark without making light of the dark. Because plain and simple, the dark happens. But there's always a place for just a sprinkling of light. So even when I personally am in my downer slumps, I'm trying to create little twinkles of light so that I can continue to move forward, continue to laugh, and continue to have some kind of impact in life, whatever that is. So we're going to take, let's see here, 12:52. Let's take 7 minutes and do this practice. So from that list, and if you'd like me to put it back on, please let me know. I am so not good with tech. My goodness gracious, this is so embarrassing. From that list, this is what we're going to be doing. Now, let's go, my friends. Let's do some 7 minutes of that sounds funny. Some 7 minutes of valuing, of actioning our values. And if you would like, if you have any questions, send them on over. If I can help you in answering what an action is, let me know, reach out, hands up. And I'll let you know when we are ready to go. Okay. Also know that if you would like to jot your actions and your definitions down in the chat, then I am going to be wanting to hear them. Also, I'll be asking this at the end, so feel free to share.
Hi, could you please put the values back on the screen so we can check them out?
Of course I can. Oh, but I'll go backwards.
Thank you.
I'm gonna figure out how. This is lovely. I also want to say one thing here. Do not judge yourself. So if you're, and an example is I was working with a client of mine, and she was writing, as we was walking her through this, she was just like, I feel like I should be putting community down. I feel guilty that I don't want to, that it shouldn't be in my top 5. And what was interesting from that is that I knew her quite well. I know her quite well. And her core value is actually family. And so I knew this. What I said to her was, dear friend, you know me. You know I love my family. But I don't even have family in my top 5. Do you think that my family isn't important to me because of this? And she laughed and she said no. And I'm like, well, okay then. Here though is what my actual core values do, is that my core values, my top 5, which are here, the creativity, belonging, kindness, significance, and humor, they allow me to be present, to show up for my family in a way that matters. It's also interesting in that sometimes our values are so gosh darn ingrained in us that we don't even need to think about them. And so my core, a few years ago, I actually had integrity as one of my top 5. It's obviously not there now. It's not that I don't have integrity. Well, I try to, but it's that it was actually my parents' value, and it still is their value. And it was modeled for me so much as I was growing up that it just became a part of who I am. So I don't need to think about it. I don't need to intentionally do actions to make sure that I'm in integrity. So when you do this, kind of sort of sit and think, well, is this my action? Is this my value? Or is it my parents'? And again, when you're actually doing your top 5 values, you just live in integrity because that's who you are. Okay. Great question. Okay, so Heidi asked the beautiful question of, so actions would be the things that we do to live that value. Yes, absolutely. So even for instance, I have kindness as one of mine. What that action is that I show up doing is having really hard conversations. That is a big action that I do, but I do the hard conversations with love and with compassion and with gratitude. So it's how are we showing up in the action of what we do? And when I was able to identify, oh, hey, I do really hard conversations, and I often have to end business relationships simply because we're transitioning into different areas of our lives. And one of them, for instance, was a business coach that I had, and he was absolutely the coach I needed at a specific time, but he wasn't who I needed going forward. But because of the relationship, because of the respect of the relationship I had for him, I knew that I didn't want to just send an email, and I certainly didn't want to just ghost him. So it's important to me, and this also comes from that understanding of love is kind, not love is easy. So I had to sit and I had to think, how can I be kind in this conversation of ending a relationship, a very significant one? And it was sitting and understanding, okay, well, this is what this individual brought to my life. Stop. This is what this individual brought to my life. Being grateful for it. Having the, face-to-face, I mean, it was over Zoom because it was during COVID. So having the face-to-face conversation was important. Expressing that gratitude, but also then having a very clear ending to the relationship and why it needed to go its separate ways. And then also sitting and being okay with hearing the emotion come to me, because it's a hard thing. But rather than not having the conversation, not having the kind conversation, because it's kinder to hurt someone than to harm them, I had to do that action. I had to do it. I had to listen, and I took it all in. And at the end of that, though, we were able to transform our relationship into this beautiful supporting relationship, no longer a business relationship. Oh, what I love. Oh, my golly gosh. Okay. James, my core value, integrity, keeping my word. Yep. Being honest and genuine. I love that. Ooh, generosity actions. Oh, beautiful. Lisa, that's lovely. Connection. Making connections between communities. Oh, by the way, I'm going to read these out. I hope you're okay with that. Yes, okay. When seeing a connection that may be valuable, definition, being able to see things that others cannot, to bring uncommon pieces. Oh, Riley, that's beautiful. I feel my heart by sharing my heart with others. Oh my goodness, Lisa. Goodness, God, that's gorgeous. Thank you so much for sharing that. Alrighty. Does anybody want to speak to what they felt? Any concerns, questions you had on this exercise? If so, let me know, and I can unmute.
I can speak.
Yes, Rosie.
I think there was somebody else who wanted to say something first. That wasn't me.
That's okay. Go ahead.
Lisa?
Okay.
No,
I just
Lisa.
I guess I don't know if I turned my thing on or not. Or I guess your slides, so you can't see anyway. But for me, generosity is like such a really natural thing for me to do, but it's always like I have to sometimes temper myself. I can be very prone to codependence or wanting to fix. So yeah, I do have to really sometimes is this being generous or is this me overstepping, and that's not my business kind of thing. So yeah, it's having that. And then I have another sort of related, I guess, would be having compassion. So where's the compassion for this is their story and not for me to fix, but I can be supportive in that. So yeah, that's sort of, I guess, double-edged sword that I kind of walk with the generosity.
But that is such a beautiful insight to know of what is the difference of generosity versus codependency. And then you can really separate and start to understand, well, when am I being generous versus where am I not even being generous to myself, right? And so how is that to yourself? Because our values also, we get to use them on ourselves. And so a lot of the time I think to myself, am I using my values for future Lindsay? And if not, is that very kind? Well, no. So that's a great insight. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah. Yeah. Rosie, did you want to say anything or?
All I was going to share is that when I read down the list of values, I thought it was interesting because a painting I did came to mind. And in the painting, all 5 of the core values were very blatant. And I thought it was neat because it all summed up. It's a really good list of words. It encompassed freedom because the word freedom was splashed on it. It encompassed love because there was a giant heart in the middle. Creativity, obviously, because it was a painting. Adventure, because it was painted live with 2 hands ambidextrously in front of 200 to 300 people. And then spirituality, because it was an expression with a bunch of verses and quotes that captured my faith.
Oh, wow. That's, that's so beautiful. Oh, flow after, yeah. Always opening to learn. Yeah, yeah. Humor is also top 5. I actually own a comedy training company. What? Flo? What? You own a comedy training company that teaches one to look for funny in their lives? Oh, that's gorgeousness. Love it. Thank you. Oh my golly gosh. Thank you all so much. Anita, to be kind to myself and others. Be a light and giving hope to others. Isn't that powerful? Ooh, Nita, thank you so much for sharing that. All right, we have a couple more minutes. Anybody else want to share, or are we happy to move on? James, and then Heidi. Share too. Oh, and Jennifer. Yes, everybody.
I'll keep mine brief then, but as to your point, Lindsay, like I'm autistic, so values, I'm seeing a therapist to figure mine out because, as you said, I'm not sure. I chose integrity because everyone in my life has told me I have integrity and I act with integrity, but I'm not sure if I truly believe that. I'm trying to figure that out. So that's where I come from. I'm just being honest that when it comes to core values, I really don't understand mine yet. I'm just trying to figure that out at this point in my life because I've existed my entire life living to others' expectations, trying to fit in. And I learned later in life that I was autistic, and that's probably why I question everything of why I did things. So that's where I'm coming from on the value aspect. Thank you.
James, that's a great point. And I will say, up until 2 years ago, I was not operating on my values either. And often it's because we're just not taught what values are. And until we understand that there are actions and that we actually need to go inside rather than look outside for what our values are, we just don't know. So thank you for your honesty on that. And yeah. Heidi.
Okay, so I picked creativity, and I'm kind of, I don't know if I'm stuck on the action, because I feel like I sort of know actions, but then I was like, well, does it have to be like actions you do every day or just like once in a while? Because I was like, if it's one of my top 5 values, then I kind of want it to be something that's like you can pull in, every day. So the action is still percolating. And then my definition is, okay, what I wrote was my definition of creativity is exploding the traditional definition from the arts to taking what you have, an idea that's in your head, and then making magic from it. So
you just made me shiver, which is funny because I'm sweating like nobody's business right now. So that's beautiful. Exploding the definition, like beautiful, because and I agree with that so much, is because creativity, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. We often think of it as just being in the arts and having to be artistic. I myself am not artistic, but I am a creative. And so when I go into life and when I go out and I even I am very intentional with having to do creative play in my life. And that can show up in cooking. That can show up in having conversations. And so I love that you're just flipping that definition of what you traditionally thought was creativity and making it your own. That in and of itself is creativity. Oy. Beautiful.
Thanks.
All right. And was it Jennifer? Jennifer, go for it.
So I have to say I cheated a bit. I took some training on values couple days ago, and I've been thinking about this actually quite a bit. And I had kind of done a data dump, and at the very top of my list was integrity and ethics. And I hadn't been able to put definitions across the words I'd put down. And what you said to me, or what you said, was around how when you have your one true one, all the other ones kind of fall away.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that those are probably the next level down. So for me, it's really about ingenuity. So like there is an aspect of creativity, but for me, the action is challenging the status quo, coming up with creative solutions, and unleashing the people around me to be more creative and better, right? And my definition is creating opportunities in the face of challenge. Like that's I'm addicted to that, right? Addiction. I think that in the last year, I haven't had that opportunity because you're stuck at home. You don't get to see people all the time. And writing that down is like, oh, I feel so energized. So yeah, it was awesome. So thank you.
Oh, that's great. I love that. And that, what a beautiful, like, oh my gosh, I am so like little goosebumps from all of you. Thank you so much. Like, wow. And ingenuity. Oy, what a genius word. Oof. Alrighty. Okay, now though, we're actually going to be talking about that one core value. If I can figure out how to move the slide forward, we will talk about that one core value. There we go. All right, so naming your one core value. This is often tied to who you were before the world told you who you had to be. So when you start to identify what this one core value is, it actually does show up daily in your actions. So my personal core essence, my core creative, well, it's creativity, surprise, my core value is that creativity. It is built directly into your goals. It influences who you even connect with. And when it is not lived, you're triggered and it leaves you empty and unfulfilled. So a little example of this, of how I started to identify that creativity was my core value, is my one core value, is that, so I am a creative individual. However, when I was 13 in my art class, I showed some art to my teacher and he said, Lindsay, you have absolutely no talent. And I stopped painting. I stopped being creative because I didn't realize that that was a huge part of who I was. It didn't matter that I wasn't talented. It mattered that, well, I guess I'm just not good, so therefore I need to stop it. And because of that, I stopped talking to who I was. I then started to become depressed. My anxiety kicked in. Perfectionism drove right up because if I had to do something, it then had to be perfect. And then I started to puke. I became a purger. And for the next decade of my life after that, that's what I did. I puked all my creativity out, all my quirk, all my humor, so that I could be normal and perfect and talented. So when you remove that one value, all the other values, even if they're, valid, they fall away. And this is because that one core value is the foundation of your very essence. And again, this is not to minimize, traumatic childhoods or anything along those lines, because those are real. But it does go back to who you were before the world told you who you needed to be. And so it takes a lot of sitting and really going right back into those times of when did you feel this core value being stripped away from you? And what did it do? Well, and what it does do is that it creates inner turmoil. So even if you are acting with your other values, with these other core values, if your one core value isn't identified, if you don't know what that is, your decision-making is impacted, your stress really goes up through the roof, and the other values themselves become less powerful. They just don't have as much impact. And then when you do activate this one core value and you know that it's in your life, you have so much more inner peace, pardon me, you often sleep better, and you are able to make decisions much more clearly. And you remove that shame, you remove that guilt, you remove any of that overwhelm in making a decision simply because you start to be more truthful and honest with yourself. So that's, yeah, and that's one reason why I'm not like, let's do a definition for all 5, because it can be quite overwhelming in the moment, and it does take some sitting and really digging in to who you are and just reflecting on yourself. Now, so how do you bring it into your life? Well, how do you tie your goals, how do you tie your values to your goals and your boundaries so that you are, achieving what you want in life? Well, you got to set goals that align with your values first off and foremost. So for instance, for me, I started a podcast all about businesses are people too, a podcast. And this ends up tying into all my core values of creativity. More importantly, though, it speaks to creating belonging, significance. There's definitely humor. And and kindness, because I get to talk to a lot of business owners and business leaders and help them and learn their stories as to how are they bringing more human into their business. And so that was a big goal of mine, that until I actually sat down and identified what my core values were, this goal, it didn't happen. And when I knew that these were mine, I set this goal of starting a podcast. And it's super fun and I love it. And it's great, in my opinion. Now, even more though, is when you are able to set goals that are aligned with your values, you then can share the boundaries that you need in place to achieve the goals. And this means you can set up the support systems, you can set up the timelines, you can you can set up relationships and communicate them properly. And so because, for instance, with my podcast, I have very specific times that I do it in my house. And I also live in a house with my husband. And he's very comfortable coming into my office whenever he wants and just starting to talk. Well, that is a boundary that I simply cannot have crossed when I'm recording, because I don't know how to edit that well on podcasting yet. But even more so, it disrupts the guests that I've invited. So I've had to set up these boundaries of, dear husband, yes, you can come into my office and start talking, however, not on these times. And so we have a calendar upstairs where I have a big R that just means I'm recording. It's a boundary that now he does not cross, and he respects it because he's a good husband. Now, when you know what your values are, you're also able to look at your actions every single day that you're taking to move forwards towards your goals. You're able to look at the boundaries that you have in place. And if you have not taken an action that maybe is a little misaligned in your personal value, which is okay, you can then easily readjust and go forward the next day. But unless you know what your core values are, if you don't know why you're feeling off, if you don't know if you're feeling frustrated that you're not taking any movement or action towards your goal, you're just going to stay stuck. But I do want to say, if you do misstep, that's okay. Why? You're human. We all misstep, and living in our values is a practice. And so when you do an action that may be misaligned with your value, because you're checking in daily, you're able to say, oh, well, why did that happen? Well, I guess I'm not going to do that tomorrow. Or you can more confidently not do it tomorrow and say no to things that take you away from the goals and the values that you have. set out. Oh my gosh, Lindsay Marie. Now, the truth is, plain and simple, living by your personal core values is not easy, and it is very hard to do. And again, and I'm going to be very blunt, you are going to fail at it. And that is okay. That's okay. We all do. Even those of us who know our core values, who have started to take massive actions, we still mess up every day. Okay, I didn't want you to see that yet. Even more is that living your core values is a truly intentional choice, and you are going to piss off the wrong people. Important to know is that these are not your people. These are not people who support you. These are not people who see you, and they are certainly not people who truly believe in you. Doesn't mean they're bad people. It just means they are not your people. And so when someone starts to push you and get a little, that's not okay, this isn't serving me, just know that that's okay. That just means you're living in alignment with your values. So long as you're not going out and actually harming people and hitting them, that's a whole other thing, and we just don't have time to cover that. But when you do start to act by your values, it becomes so much easier because you're using your right values. And again, just like everything in life, though, everything worth anything in life is a practice. And so it's really having that compassion with yourself to check back in and say, oh, I didn't act in alignment with my values. Why? What was it that took me away from it? And when you can really start to get intentional on your actions, you know how to get back in alignment with your values. Now, this next slide, my friends, is that your values aren't stagnant. Plain and simple, just as we ourselves are not stagnant, we can have beautiful, gorgeous days or a little frumpier days. But the thing is, while your one core value, that one core value may remain throughout your life, your other top values are more than likely to change, because plain and simple, you're going to experience life, you're going to grow, you're going to have things that change you as a person. And just as our own mental health has ebbs and flows throughout the day, your other values will be coming forward or backwards throughout the day. Even if you do have one core value, one day your tertiary, that's a big word, Lindsay, your third important value may have more importance during one day. And this is okay. I mean, as I said, like, I now have creativity and kindness, belonging, significance, and humor as my core value, and as my core values. And while I've always had, apparently, creativity and belonging and humor, I also had integrity and wealth in my top 5. But then I grew as a person, and I experienced life differently, and I started to really understand, what are my actions in my life, and what are those actual values then? And so if you're just like, but this is who I was, and these are the values that I've been acting upon until now, well, just know that you're not even the same person that you were a month ago. And you're certainly not the same person who you were at the beginning of 2020 to now. And so this is okay. And it's okay. Now, what's important, though, is that, it is sitting, it is reflecting. And so there are some questions that you can ask yourself to really help you live and stay true to your own personal core veracious value. And that first one is, well, when you are making a decision, note why you made it. What value was this specific decision tied to? From there, and this is important, particularly at this time of the year, is review your goals. Are these actually in alignment with your values? And if not, whose are they aligned with? And a great example of this is that a colleague of mine, at the beginning of 2020, he had set exercise. I want to exercise 3 times a week. Great. And he had set that at the beginning of January 2020. And in March 2020, he said, I haven't even done exercise once this year. And so I said to him, well, why is exercising your goal? Yes, I was a little blunt. Why is that your goal? And through a series of conversations, it came out that his actual value was not health or exercise. It was that it was family. He merely wanted to have energy so he could play with his grandkids at the end of the day. So he wasn't exhausted, but he was finding himself, when exercise was the goal, he would come home and sit on the couch and just collapse and not do anything. Once we had that conversation and he identified that his actual value is family, and this is why he wanted to exercise, he still came home and he still turned the TV on at the end of the day, but rather than flopping, that's not a word, flopping and sitting on the couch, he stretched. He got down on the floor and stretched. That's it. And he had so much more energy to just go and play with his grandkids before all the lockdown happened, that we couldn't even see our family in that capacity. But that was the biggest thing, is that it had nothing to do with losing weight. It had nothing to do with just exercising. It had everything to do with being present for his family. And then also, what boundaries do you specifically have or need to have to support you in living your values? And then even more is, who do you allow to cross these boundaries? And this is key, because we often let our family cross our boundaries because they're our family. But that's not always okay. And so it's really taking the time to have an honest conversation as to what these boundaries do for you. And again, if they are people who love you and support you and see you, they won't cross them. They will respect them. Alrighty, so these questions themselves, here's a complimentary download. I have the exercise of the value exercise that we did. What are we doing again today, my friends? And you can find it here to go and do your value exercise offline. Take the time. The questions are there as well, so that you can circle back and start to understand, well, why am I making this decision? How does it support my value? What are my goals? All of that. And let me know. The next slide is just a question slide. So if you have any questions right now, I'll leave this up here for you all. But let me know. Are there any questions, concerns, wanderings that I can support you with in your values?
I have a question.
I want to hear it.
Oh, I sang it.
I said, I want to hear it. Go, Rosie.
You said the same thing. This is Rosie. I want to ask about what you said, bring light into the dark without making light of the dark. Was that something that was burst from inside of you, or was that a quote you heard somewhere?
That's me. I came up with that. Yeah, because for me, and it stemmed from the depression, constipation, and all of that. And it was really when I started to sit with, listen, I'm not sad, I'm depressed, but what does that mean? Right? And it, for me, it just becomes so much more powerful. And when I started to talk with my friends and listen to them, what they really appreciate is that I can bring a little bit of levity in those really dark moments without making them feel like it's a flippant thing. It's I want people to be able to feel a little bit of light in their heart and not minimize the dark. And so to me, it's just a powerful thing of bringing light in the dark without making light of it. And that's one thing that I've been told is a gift of mine. And I use it for myself, and I use it for my friends and my hubby. And my hubby, it sounds like puppy, but he's my hubby. And that's really it. So any other questions? No? Well, if you would like to connect, here's me. I would love to hear from you. Feel free to reach out. And, even as you do start to activate the values in your life, your voracious values, or your voracious values, again, yum, yum, yum. Let me know, message me, let me know how it's going. Ow. Oh, thank you, Flo. Very crisp. Thank you. Yes. And it's absolutely, please share the resources. I think if we all lean in a little bit more to who we are and being honest with who we are and showing up in our most honest, aligned way, other people do that. And then we also attract those people and those energies that want us to be in our life. And I know from personal experience, when I wasn't living my core values, I was drawn into energies and other people's values that were not mine. And they made me feel so gross every day. And I did not like myself, even a little bit. And my humor disappeared. And could you imagine? Oh, that'd be horrid. But it's so important to just take that time to sit and think, is this me? And how then do I do it? And how then can I even show these values to myself so that I'm supporting not just my family and my friends and my colleagues and myself in the moment, but that you're really setting yourself up for a life that is aligned with who you want to be. And you can start to show up more in a bigger, more powerful way that people want to be around. I'm assuming, I don't know. I haven't been around people in a long time, so Zoom's my friend. But when we are allowed back in the world, it's we then have more compassion. And I found, especially during this time of everyone is so quick to anger and so quick to be divided. And I think we all know this world is on fire right now. It's all about really leaning into who we are and what light can we bring and what do we want this world to be. And then life just becomes easier for us and the stresses are there, but they're not there. And thank you. Questions, comments, concerns? You guys are making me cry. Thank you all so much for coming. Oh, thank you, Heidi. Lindsay. Flo, thank you. Thank you. And Rosie and Flo, thank you both for your puns at the beginning of this whole share. Because how else would you start a workshop? Now, I believe, oh golly, we are a little over. It's 1:31. I've kept you all a minute over. This is the end of the conference. This was a day, a morning filled of hope and conversation. And I hope that you are all going to be able to walk away from today and start having conversations, start connecting more, and really just knowing that you are wonderful just the way you are. Thank you. Yay. Rosie, your face is wonderful. Thank you. Oh, you're muted, my dear. Okay, beautiful. So again, feel free to reach out. I'm here to listen. And if you have any comments, send them on through. Okay. Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just realized I dropped the